The Zerelions were not the strongest race in the galaxy. They had no great fleets, no terrifying weapons, no legendary warriors. What they had was far worse. They had rules. Every detail of Zerelian society, every transaction, every conversation, every movement of a ship in orbit was wrapped in an endless cocoon of regulations. They were a species that worshipped bureaucracy as if it were divine law. For centuries, the galaxy tolerated them. At first, their obsession with structure seemed helpful. Immaculate records, airtight trade agreements, treaties so detailed they made even the most paranoid species feel safe. Over time, though, the truth revealed itself. The Zerelions weren't allies. They were parasites of paperwork. An armada once sat starving in orbit because the Zerelions denied docking clearance. The fleet hadn't applied 3 weeks in advance. An empire tried to move on them, only to be suffocated by injunctions and counterclaims until its generals retired from paperwork fatigue. A mining world fell into economic ruin because the Zerelions halted all exports, citing incorrectly stapled export licenses. The galaxy grumbled but endured. Until now, the Zerelions finally pushed things too far. Overnight, they declared all trade licenses across 3 sectors expired pending renewal. Ships were frozen in ports, cargoes rotted in bays, hospitals faced critical supply delays. Markets trembled, food distribution grids stalled, panic hummed through 3-star systems. And then the breaking point arrived, not as a body count in the council chamber, but as the kind of plea that echoed through every civilization. Councillor Threx of Valaria rose before the assembly, voice cracking. A cargo shuttle carrying emergency rations and pediatric vaccines had been held at Zerelion customs because the Zerelions claimed the word children did not meet the legal definition of sentient minors under their trade code. If those shipments weren't released within a month, whole Valari settlements faced the real possibility of their children starving. The council chamber, used to hours of procedural batting and polite denials, fell very, very quiet. Bureaucracy that could threaten children's lives was no longer an abstract annoyance. It was a moral emergency. Armies and sanctions had already failed. Negotiations only fed the monster of paperwork. Then a human delegate raised a hand. It was Ambassador Riley Grant, humanity's representative to the council. "Give us 1 transport ship," Riley said, smiling as if he was asking for a cup of tea. 1 month. The Zerelions will come running to you, begging to release those shipments themselves. A ripple of disbelief rolled through the chamber. Murmurs echoed against the vaulted dome. One councillor's crest feathers flared in outrage. "Arrogant mammals, do you mock this assembly?" Another barked a laugh. 1 ship against centuries of Zerelion red tape? Absurd. A third leaned forward, mandibles clicking nervously. What could you possibly send that would succeed where armies and treaties failed?" Yet another whispered to their neighbour, "Perhaps the humans have some hidden superweapon." Riley leaned back, unbothered. "We're not sending diplomats. We're not sending soldiers. We're sending something far more effective." He savoured the pause. "We're sending Karens." The chamber fell silent. Not a word was spoken. Councillors glanced at one another, antennae twitching, crests rising, mandibles clicking in unease. Karens? Was this a secret Terran intelligence agency? A covert strike force? A cabal of assassins? Some whispered of saboteurs, others of a shadow network too dangerous to name aloud. No one dared to ask. But confusion rippled through the council like a shockwave, and for the first time in centuries, the thought crept in. Perhaps the humans truly had a weapon the galaxy did not understand. The Zerelions prided themselves on having the most secure ports in the galaxy. No ship could land on Formalis Prime without first filing countless documents, forms stacked so high they could bury a starship. Among them were such classics as P-33, the permission slip to request a permission slip for docking. A pre-entry notification form in quadruplicate. The intent to not be an intentional contraband carrier form, a noise abatement certificate, a carbon emission apology waiver, a dockside bird migration impact statement, a Form 92B, proper helmet etiquette during disembarkation, and, most infamously, a certificate of intent not to intend anything suspicious. Any deviation resulted in automatic fines, hearings, and in some cases, century-long bans. And humans had filed none. So when the human transport ship requested landing, The Zerelion Port Authority immediately flagged it for 37 separate violations before they'd even considered granting clearance. What they didn't realize was that this was no ordinary vessel. It carried certified Karens, humanity's most relentless enforcers of customer rights. Leading them was Deborah, Supreme Keeper of Receipts and High Chair of the Complaint Council. Complaint 001A, Deborah, Keeper of Receipts, transmitted. This violation notice is illegible. Font size violates your multi-species visual accessibility standard 552B, which requires documents to be legible across 12 ocular resolutions, including compound and infrared-sensitive eyes. We demand a corrected version. The Zerelions smiled with thin-lipped arrogance. At last, someone had chosen to play their game properly. The code of order was clear. No complaint could go unanswered, and here stood a challenger bold enough to invoke it. With relish, they issued a corrected version. The Karens pounced. Complaint 002B. The fine for noise abatement is listed as 400 credits, but Annex 331 specifies 395. Inconsistency. We demand clarification. That summoned a review board panel, the first volley in what promised to be a glorious bureaucratic duel. Deborah filed again. Complaint 003C. Violations exceeding 20 must be subdivided into separate cases under Regulation 421. Your notice contained 37. We demand resubmission. By law, the Zerelions were forced to withdraw their entire violation packet and reissue it as smaller filings, which in turn opened a loophole. Deborah flipped to tab 14 of her binder. Her voice was sharp enough to cut steel. According to Regulation 9042B, any first-time offenders with active disputes pending resolution must be granted temporary physical access to attend hearings in person. As we now have 3 active disputes, you are legally obligated to permit our vessel to land provisionally. The Zerelions' smug smiles faltered. The clause was archaic, originally written to allow primitive traders to appear in person if they couldn't transmit filings electronically. It had never been used in living memory, and yet the humans had invoked it. Correctly, the Port Authority officers looked at each other, horrified. They had expected resistance. They had not expected mastery. And so, to the horror of every clerk and commissioner on the planet, the human vessel touched down within a single day. A feat no species in galactic history had ever achieved without months of proper forms. The port drones rerouted, guiding the Terran ship down. Not because the Zerelions wanted it, but because to deny the landing now would break their own sacred code. The Karens disembarked not as violators, but as protected complainants with unresolved cases. That status gave them rights. Rights to hearings, rights to escalations, rights to demand managers. "Excuse me," Deborah snapped the moment her foot touched the cracked tarmac. She pointed down. "Unsafe surface. That's complaint 004D. I'll be filing it myself. Now, where is your manager?" The Zerelion officer's 4 eyes twitched. He hated to admit it, but the human had just played the rules better than a Zerelion. And worse, she looked like she enjoyed it. The news did not stay contained to a single planet. It spread across the galaxy like wildfire. A human transport had landed on Zerelion soil without the mandatory 3-week advance notice, without the stacks of forms, without even a ceremonial stamp. The shock rippled outward, reaching the Galactic Council chambers. Species who had spent centuries bent under Zerelion red tape froze in disbelief. The impossible had just happened. The most feared bureaucracy in the galaxy had just been forced to escort humanity's deadliest weapon straight into its heart. Hope stirred in the chamber, fragile but real. If the humans could bend the Zerelions this far, maybe they could clear the sanctions. Maybe the rations and vaccines would finally reach Valaria's children. The Zerelions had ruled the galaxy's legal stage for 1,000 years. They believed themselves untouchable, their bureaucracy a fortress no outsider could breach. Empires had fallen, trade coalitions had dissolved, and entire civilizations had choked on the endless scrolls of Zerelion statutes. Every subclause, every appeal, every filing requirement was a weapon forged to ensure that no petition, no plea, and certainly no complaint could ever pierce their walls of order. To face the Zerelions in paperwork was not to fight, but to drown. The High Registry Hall was the heart of this fortress, a cavernous chamber with tiered desks rising like cliffs around a central podium. Thousands of clerks scratched styluses against parchment-thin crystal sheets, the sound a constant rain of bureaucracy. Statues of great registrars past loomed from alcoves, carved in poses of stern disapproval, as if forever judging those who dared enter. The air itself seemed heavy with the dust of precedent. When the humans walked in, the Zerelions were already smirking. Surely this would be quick. These Terrans would be buried in procedural rulings before they could open their mouths. Deborah stepped to the podium. She carried no datapads, no stylus, no timid plea. Instead, she slapped down a massive leather binder with the confidence of a woman demanding a refund on a 3-year-old blender. The sound cracked across the chamber like a gunshot. "First," Deborah said, her eyes narrowing on the presiding registrar, "I don't like your tone." The registrar blinked, caught off guard. "My tone? That is irrelevant to the proceedings." "Complaint 05A," Deborah cut in, her voice like sharpened steel. Registrar conducted hearing in an unprofessional manner. Escalation requested. The chamber went deathly still. Escalation was not a request in Zerelion law. It was an absolute. The moment a party demanded it, procedure required a higher-ranking official to be summoned. The registrar's quill trembled in his hand. With a stiff gesture, he called for his superior. The Zerelions had always believed escalation was their greatest strength. Higher ranks meant deeper knowledge of law, greater control of process, greater power to crush a petitioner's will. They had never imagined escalation could be weaponized against them. When the senior official arrived, the Karens swarmed like sharks scenting blood. One declared the chamber's lighting inadequate for proper form review, citing Health and Safety Standard 443. Another demanded the hearing be restarted because the registrar's quills were audibly distracting. A third stood, hand on her hip, and announced that her chair was insufficiently ergonomic, a violation of Visitor Comfort Annex 55. Each objection triggered a new hearing, each hearing required an official response, and each response gave the Karens new fuel. By the second day, the Zerelions were rattled. By the fourth, their clerks had already fallen behind schedule. Then Deborah struck again. She filed complaint 06B against the response to her first complaint. Marcia, keeper of coupons, followed with complaint 07C against the handling of 06B. Others piled on. One by one, they began filing complaints about the complaints themselves. The registrar's 4 eyes widened in horror. This was not supposed to be possible. Their code was perfect. Their citadel was airtight. And yet, here they were, trapped in a recursive spiral of their own sacred procedure. For the first time in living memory, Zerelion officials felt the cold bite of fear inside the High Registry Hall. The Zerelions had prepared to drown the humans in forms. Instead, they found themselves gasping for air. The High Registry Hall had descended into pandemonium. What began as a trickle of objections had become a flood, each Karen weaponizing the code with surgical precision. By the time Deborah's complaint 425B was logged, the registry's docket was already overflowing. Marcia followed with complaint 425C, and then came 425D, 426E, and on and on. Complaints sprouted like hydra heads. Each response from the Zerelions birthed 2 more disputes. Each denial sparked another escalation. When one Karen noticed the registry's lighting was uneven and causing headaches, the others took photos, measured lumens, and filed a collective grievance citing Interspecies Comfort Statute 1442B. When another complained about the squeak of quills on parchment, the group submitted a joint request for ergonomic silence standards, accompanied by a petition for emotional well-being compensation. The Zerelions tried to stall, but every delay triggered another avalanche of complaints, not against the original issue, but against the response itself. Complaints 1B, response received late, unacceptable. Complaints OT6C, tone of denial excessively curt, disrespectful. Complaint 46A, clerk's handwriting fails clarity threshold for short-sighted Trinari allies. The Zerelions had intended to drown the humans in paperwork. Instead, they were drowning themselves. Then came the reviews. The Zerelions had always taken pride in their status crystal, a glowing monument that broadcasted the registry's reputation score across the galaxy. It had never dropped below a pristine 9.8 in 5 centuries. But once the Karens discovered the leave feedback glyph, the score plummeted overnight. 2.4. then 0.5. A clerk ran into the high hall, clutching the crystal's flickering readout. Esteemed ministers, we have received 1,000 negative reviews. 1,000! A councillor croaked. Impossible, the system doesn't allow duplicates. They're not duplicates, the clerk whispered. Each one is unique, each one cites different regulations. The chamber filled with horrified silence. Optics, muttered a senior official, the word sour in his mouth. We must repair our optics. Matters grew worse when the Karens discovered the transparency protocols. Ancient safeguards meant to ensure the registry's impartiality. If triggered, all documents, rulings and correspondence would become public record. Deborah leaned forward across the podium, eyes narrowing. If we don't see results soon, she said, we'll have no choice but to share our experience publicly. Every Zerelion in the chamber stiffened. To expose internal processes was unthinkable. Transparency was a last resort, a doomsday clause meant to deter corruption. No one had ever dared threaten it. The word itself had not been spoken aloud in centuries, but Deborah spoke the words as casually as ordering a refund. The Galactic Council tuned in through scrying crystals and hollow screens, watching in awed silence as the mighty Zerelion stronghold cracked. They're turning the code itself into a weapon, whispered one councillor. Not fighting it, said another. Wielding it. At the centre of the storm, Deborah stood once more at the registry podium, her binder gleaming under the two dim chandeliers. I don't want an excuses, she said, her voice calm but razor-sharp. I want answers, and if I don't get them... She paused, letting the silence stretch until even the quills stopped scratching. I will escalate. The words thundered through the hall like cannon fire. The Zerelions had always believed escalation was the blade they alone controlled, but now they were the ones on the receiving end, and there was no ceilings, no higher office, no end to the demands. Their fortress was not a fortress, it was a maze of their own making, and the Karens had seized the map, and they were not done. The clerks were the jewel of the Zerelion Empire. They were the spine of the code, the silent army that processed, stamped and filed every form that kept their world pristine. But the Terran Karens were unlike anything they had ever faced. Complaint after complaint rained down on them. Violation disputes, counterfilings, appeals to subclauses buried 6,000 pages deep. What once had been a day's steady work turned into an avalanche. By the second week, most clerks had abandoned sleep. Their desks overflowed with petitions and appeals. In desperation, some filed for resignation. But Zerelion law was cruel. Resignation required submission of Form 9991R, resignation form in triplicate. Form 77R, declaration of socially acceptable reasons for resignation, with supporting witnesses. Form 88Q, acknowledgement of intent to cease acknowledgement. Form 22DD, certification of desk cleanliness prior to departure. An exit interview approved by 3 separate supervisors. Form 19L, statement of regret for leaving the collective. Minimum 500 words. Form 44MM, transfer of ownership for office mugs. Proof of successor training signed by the departing clerk, along with 19 subsequent forms. No clerk could clear their own paperwork in order to leave. Their resignations were rejected, and then the Karens noticed. Excuse me. Deborah's voice cut through the Ministry of Records like a drill. These workers are being exploited. She slapped a binder on the counter. According to your own regulation Fee 501A, any labour exceeding 60 hours per rotation without proper compensation constitutes a labour hour violation. These clerks have been here for 120 hours. Where are their breaks, their health stipends, their overtime pay? The head clerks bristled as he sputtered. They're working overtime because of you. Every hour another complaint, another hearing, another panel. Deborah leaned in, binder snapping open like a weapon. So you admit it. Exploitation caused directly by managerial negligence. That strengthens our case. The head clerk twitched in alarm. That regulation has never been enforced. Well, it is now, Deborah snapped. We demand compensation on their behalf. Retroactive, with penalties. Or, she smiled sweetly, we escalate. The word echoed like thunder. Suddenly, the Karens were not just tormenting the Zerelion clerks, they had become their champions. Exhausted workers, once loyal to the codes, now found themselves defended by iron-willed human petitioners who never took no for an answer. For every rejected resignation, the Karens filed an appeal. For every denial, an escalation. For every delay, a demand for immediate review. Within a fortnight, the entire clerical system seized up. No forms could be processed without clerks, no rulings could be enforced without filings, and no clerks dared touch another form, knowing the Karens were ready to pounce with demands for compensation, apologies, and retraining seminars. The Zerelion bureaucracy, the greatest the galaxy had ever known, simply stopped. In the Grand Zerelion Council chamber, the High Council convened. But this time there were no neat scrolls of agenda. The clerks had refused to prepare them. A councillor whispered, trembling, "We have no paperwork. Nothing is filed." Another groaned, "Even our gathering here is undocumented. By our own code, this assembly is illegal. We are nothing but a rogue mob of councillors." The chamber shook with despair. Their mightiest weapon, their proudest heritage, had collapsed under the weight of Terran complaints and their own clerks' exhaustion. When the Karens marched in again, binders clutched like holy scripture. The councillors did not resist. Deborah stood before them, expression both triumphant and self-righteous. "We demand resolution. On behalf of these overworked clerks, on behalf of ourselves, on behalf of common decency." The High Archon, once untouchable, bent his crest low. His voice broke as if the centuries of protocol had finally exhausted him. "Please," he begged, hands trembling, "tell me, what do you want? What was the purpose of all this? Why did you come? Name it, and we will do whatever it takes to get you out of our sight. Repeals, reforms, release the shipments. Command it, and it will be so. Anything. Just leave." The Karens nodded in satisfaction. They had gotten results. Deborah tilted her head, binder hugged close like a sacred weapon. Her smile was sweet, but her words were sharpened glass. "Well, for starters, join the next Galactic Council session and announce the release of those shipments. And don't worry," she gave a mock gasp. "Normally, you'd wait for the Council to send 50 invitations you could complain about. But lucky for you, your invitation just arrived, straight from me. Consider this your fast pass." The chamber quaked with silence. Even the councillors dared not breathe. The fortress of Zerelion bureaucracy had fallen, and its rulers now obeyed the Karens. The Galactic Council chamber buzzed with rumours. Delegates leaned over marble benches, whispering like children before a storm. For centuries, the Zerelions had arrived in perfect formation, scrolls piled high, clerks marching in lockstep, but today they came empty-handed. No carts of forms, no ceremonial stamps, no smug precision. The High Archon's steps were heavy as he entered the centre ring. His crest sagged, his robe plain. For the first time in living memory, the embodiment of bureaucracy looked defeated. Councillor Threx of Valaria, voice raw with hope, rose to speak. "Do you bring release?" The Archon's 4 eyes closed, and when he spoke, his voice cracked. "We withdraw our holds. All cargo detained at our ports shall move freely. Food, medicine, supplies, effective immediately." Gasps filled the chamber. On distant colonies, ships already warmed their thrusters. Docking clamps unlatched, cargo bays opened. Relief was coming, not someday, but now. And further, the Archon continued, each word like a stone dragged uphill. The Code of Order is suspended, pending reform. The silence was absolute. For millennia, the Code had been law above law. To suspend it was not just a concession. It was an admission. The monument had toppled. All eyes turned to the human delegate Riley Grant. Unlike the Zerelions, he carried no scrolls, no seals, no binders, only a thin smile. The human rose, not with triumph, but with quiet dignity. His words carried no mockery, no demand, only sincerity. "Then on behalf of this council and of every world that waits in hope," the delegate said, "we thank you. May this be not an end for the Zerelions, but a beginning, a place among us, reborn." For a moment the chamber held its breath. Then, slowly, the councillors began to rise, not in applause but in solemn recognition. The galaxy had witnessed something more than victory. It had witnessed change. The shockwaves spread in hours. Cargo ships streamed from Zerelion ports like freed prisoners, their holds bursting with long-hoarded rations and medicine. Worlds starved of trade for months breathed again. Markets revived, hospitals stirred, children laughed. Yet even greater than the relief was the realization. The unshakable wall of Zerelion order could be broken. Not by fleets, not by sanctions, but by something far more relentless. Across the galaxy, leaders asked the same hushed question. If the humans could do this to the Zerelions, what else might they do? On frontier stations, merchants raised toasts to Earth. In bureaucrat dens, clerks muttered about reform with an edge of fear. And on 1,000 datapads, the legend of the Terran task force spread, a story of beings who could bend paperwork into a weapon sharper than any blade. Historians would later name it the collapse of the code. But in council halls and marketplaces, another phrase took root, quiet, nervous, and enduring. Don't let humans send the Karens.